I am David Greenberg, a musician, social neuroscientist from Jerusalem, and I am here today with Rasheed Ogunlaru. It's my privilege to be able to sit with you virtually over Zoom and to interview you. Rasheed has been a colleague and a mentor of mine for many, many years. And this is the first time I get to, after I think 10 years of knowing Rasheed, that I get to interview you. So um, let's get started. I think Rasheed is a speaker, a coach, a author, has so many unique talents. Every time I walk into a room with Rasheed or have a meeting with him, the energy is always immediately uplifted. And we can dig in and find out what Rasheed is all about, and his coaching and his books. And so, Rasheed, can you just like tell me a little bit and tell us about what you do?
Well, first of all, thank you. It's really warm when somebody, it's like, when somebody invites you into their house and that they, and there's food or a cup of tea. It's like that, when somebody gives you a really warm introduction. So first of all, I want to thank you very much. It's my real pleasure. I'm a coach. I'm a motivational speaker. In plain English, my job is to help people move ahead in their lives and their careers and their relationships and in their work. It includes people at point of career change, people who are starting running their own business, but mostly these days within organization leadership, team development, and so on. But my very first background was in media and PR. And then I was struggling as a singer and performer. I wanted to become a very successful singer and performer. And whilst I was pursuing my singing journey, I met so many people that struggled with life balance and career direction and so on, that I retrained as a coach, because I'd always had an interest in people development, and I wanted to help singers and performers to take charge of their own careers, and I wanted tools to help them. So I trained as a coach, but once I trained, I realized there's all sorts of people who could benefit from that, not just singers and performers. So that's a little bit about my journey in a brief nutshell to the work that I do now. And I've been coaching for the last, oh goodness, over 15 years full time, a couple of years before that part time as well.
One of the things that for me, I think is really sticks out is that your path, from what I know, was definitely not the traditional path. It was absolutely the road less traveled. And I think that to me is so rich, because when I come across people who take that path, the path that there's something inside that it's driving them, and they have the courage and the bravery to do it in a slightly different way. The end result is something that's always really unique and remarkable. And so I was wondering if you might be able to shed light on that. You mentioned being a musician and struggling with musician and then retraining. Can you tell me a little bit about that path that you took that was slightly outside the box?
I think there's something about, I mean, as you say that, I wonder what the path well trod is. I wonder what it is. I think that, and it makes me think also about that sometimes when somebody's going on a path to be authentically themselves, that's a bit unusual. I think that we broadly got a choice of two paths, haven't we? To do and pursue things that our parents or family have done, or that we're told in the mainstream we should do, traditional careers. And I guess that for people who want to be a kind of creator, it seemed less so. It's really weird, because my journey began, the first thing I wanted to be was an author. And funny enough, I forgot about that until many years later, when I published what's my third book, my first published by a publisher, the Soul Trader book. So when I was a kid, I wanted to be an author. That's what I wanted to do. And I used to write, fantasy stories. It might be about space sagas or school dramas and so on. It was fiction. I was writing. That's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be an author. And my English teacher at school, at secondary school, he was an author. That's what I wanted to be, right? Then when I left school, I thought, well, what do I want to do? What's the nearest thing to do with like that? Like writing. I didn't know if you could write for a living. And I thought, well, kind of journalism. I was lucky that the third job interview I went for was working. The first job interview was something to do with law. The other, as a legal executive. The second one was in marketing and advertising. I always thought I'd be good in marketing and advertising. Didn't get that. In fact, that might have been the first job interview. And then the third one was working for the Which stable of magazines and books that campaign on consumers' behalf. I got that job. I was 18, and I learned a huge amount about it, and a huge amount in that field. And I was responsible for promoting their books and magazine and books, a stable of stuff that they did. But then what happened was, after 10 years, I was made redundant, and then I asked myself, what do I want to do? Now, during that time, a friend of mine who was pursuing a career in singing, had put together a group of people who wanted to kind of help him, dancers. And I loved dancing for fun, but I'd never been classically trained or anything as a dancer. And I'm not good at being choreographed, but I was a dancer in my friend's group. And then I realized that, hang on a minute, maybe I want to do singing. And I remember that when I was a kid, I'd written a poem. I used to write a lot of poetry. I'd written a poem. And I wrote a particular poem that I realized, no, this is going to be lyrics as though it's going to be a song. So I remember at 16 was something that was going to be a song. And that was the very first time I tried to write a song. But then fast forward however many years, I thought, let me have a go at this thing about pursuing music. And I'm the kind of person, once I've got an idea, I just kind of go with it. I produced myself these really cheap little cards that said vocalist, crooner, songwriter. And I thought, okay, if it says songwriter, I better learn to write songs. So I started to write songs, maybe because I was good with words and had done poetry and so on. And I devoured music as a kid, devoured it, pop music. I'd be listening to the charts all the time. So for me, pursuing music was something I thought, let me just go for it. So I've been made redundant. That maybe gave me a nudge to do it. I was relatively old at the time to begin a career in music. I was about 26. Got a singing teacher, learned about music, was just putting demos together. And it's hard, it's tough. And two things happened during that time. One was I had time on my hands. I was working kind of part-time and I became a Samaritan volunteer, that helped people in crisis. So I think that informed a lot of where my path would go in terms of my work about inner peace, inner fulfillment and compassion and helping people. But the other thing was that the singing, as I was pursuing it, I was meeting other singers who struggle with life balance and confidence and so on. And when I worked in media, I used to train people to be on TV and radio. I was a trainer and I had this interest in personal development. My best friend, who was also a singer, was interested in everything from personal development, self-development, Eastern philosophy, you name it, and we put together this thing called the Mind, Body, and Spirit of Singing, we wanted to help singers to become rounded as singers. So I went off and trained as a coach to get these tools to be able to coach, and he did performance-related stuff. And then what happened was the more and more we went into it, the more and more my coaching took a lead and my singing took a back seat. So for a few years, the singing took a back seat. And then it was a number of years before then I re-picked up my music. But what happened was I feel that the work that I do now blends all of the different passions. The passion for writing, so as a coach, I've written a few things. The performance is for me as a speaker. So when I'm giving a speech, it's a performance. When I go out and run a workshop or training, it's a performance. So the singers found a home in the speaker, but I still sing and record for fun. But I'm lucky, for me personally, my life doesn't depend, my livelihood doesn't depend on my singing, because that's tough, but also maybe it wasn't meant to be for me. I'm lucky now that I can just, when I'm recording, I can just record. It can just be about the music, because I found I was distracted. It's a long answer, but I found that when I was pursuing music for a living, I'll be in the recording studio, David, and I'm thinking about how I'm going to package up the thingy. I'm thinking about focusing on going to see record labels or trying to have those meetings. So I was never present enough. I'm a better singer now than I was when I was pursuing it, trying to pursue it. I'm a better singer now. I'm more free as a songwriter and a singer.
It's fascinating. When I first met you, about 10 years ago, there were other coaches that I had been in contact with that I know, but there was none when I met you that had your approach and perspective. And I thought to myself, how does he do what he did? Well, how does he do what he does? I didn't quite understand it. And kind of you just going through that journey with me now really kind of highlighted, even from at the very beginning of being a child and writing and having that accompanying you and expressing and writing fantasy, going then and transitioning to creating music and singing. No, it's not so much of a surprise that you're able to reach so many different people, so many different types of creatives, or whether it's like business people or executives or artists or musicians, that you're able to speak in all these different languages, which really ultimately is like one language. And one of the things also that I've really appreciated so much from knowing you for these past several years is not a lot of coaches talk about the heart, or they talk about the soul. It's often a very kind of manualized, or here's this 3-step process, and here's this 5-step process, or there's a lot of like gimmicks and things. But with you, Rasheed, it's always been really authentic, and it's always been real, and you've always connected, as long as I've known you, to the person, whoever that you're dealing with. You're able to speak to who they truly are and to bring that out to the forefront.
There's two things that jump out to me from what you were saying, and thank you for that. There's two things that happened along the journey that I think were relevant and useful here. When I trained as a coach, the training was amazing. I trained with an amazing coaching company that I do some training for now. But I felt personally that there were some things that were missing from the main bits of the content, because the main bit about goals and traditional coaching skills, which is as it should be. But I felt, well, energy, trust, flow. Look, there were lots of things that weren't covered that I thought were really important. And I found myself writing a book. This is an incarnation of it, called The Gift of Inner Success, about all those invisible, intangible things. And so I did that, and then I sent it out to publishers. And a bit like when I was pursuing as a singer, nobody was interested. So in the end, later on, I self-published a different version of it. But then, interestingly, there's a bit where I recorded a coaching tool for people, and it was quite traditional coaching tool, right? And it was called Create Your Ideal Life. And after I recorded it, I thought, there's something missing. And I wrote the sleeve notes, which was like a stream of consciousness. I thought, okay, that's more like it. And then I recorded my next CD, which was called Become Who You Are. And I mention it because it was a stream of consciousness, and it was based on, very early on in my coaching, I discovered this quote by Archbishop Desmond Tutu, which says, you're a very special person, become what you are. And I thought, this become who you are. So my approach to becoming who you are, it was becoming clear to me that this stuff about, well, we're always so obsessed by this idea of becoming this or that, or trying to achieve this and that. For me, it was all about this, seeing the magic that was already there. So again, at the back of The Gift of Inner Success, it's about embracing the magic we already possess. So for me, what was happening was that there was this stuff that was coming to me through my own journey, from my own, if you like, spiritual, or the small s journey, this journey of finding myself. Because when you're a coach, you've got to go on, I guess, a professional development journey, but I guess it was married with me going on a self-development journey. But also for me, it was about being still, listening. And I've always been good at listening and finding out what does and what doesn't resonate with me. And a lot of the work that's emerged for me has come about in the same way as my music does. I'll be listening. So The Gift of Inner Success and Become Who You Are were both streams of consciousness. With Become Who You Are, I literally wrote a list of song titles almost, and then I went and spoke it. So and it came out. So for me, the whole approach comes from that thing of trust and being still enough. So David, I don't know. I don't really know. For me personally, I don't know of another way. When I try and do things the way that people say that you should do it, it just doesn't work for me. I've got to trust my heart. I'm not, even as a musician, I can't count mathematically. Like, I'll be in with my producer, that he'll say the count, and I can't. I feel the count. I feel it. So for me, it's feeling, and I have to trust that. I have to trust it. And that's the only way. That's the way I work best. So I don't really know anything else. Really.
It reminds me, one of my saxophone teachers told me that the music goes faster than your mind. So you can't be thinking about it too much. You have to be going with your heart. And I think that's in the same way if you're in dialogue with somebody, in a relationship with somebody, in all different spaces. If you're in coaching, that there's something else that's intangible to be listening to. And that's actually, I was really wanted to hear more about when you said about listening, because there's in a lot of introductory coaching sessions, there's this exercise where you pair up in a dyad and each person has their turn at speaking, and then you have to test your listening by like repeating exactly what the other person said. But I think the listening that you're talking about isn't just about that type of listening, about, oh, are you actually listening to what they said? There's like another layer, I think, that you're mentioning. Can you speak a little bit more about that?
I like that. Thank you for asking about that. Yeah, I think it's listening to the heart. It's listening. I think there's a few things to it. It's like, when people are telling you a story, they're telling you their life story, and there's things that they're saying, there's things they're not saying. For me, I've got a saying, everything that people do, don't do, say, and don't say speaks volumes about them. But this quote came to me about 6 7 years ago. If you listen quietly enough, life will whisper its secrets to you. If you listen quietly enough, life will listen. So my job is to be still. So as a coach, yeah, we're trained to listen, and as a Samaritan volunteer, I was trained to listen. But there's something in that listening. What happens is that I'm present, and in that space, and if we come about it with an open heart, and that we're doing what we're passionate about, then I hear, then we meet, and you then sometimes, lucky, you hear the music, the rhythm of what that person is, their own music. And what I've learned to do, I didn't have that when I first started out as a coach. I will play back to people what I'm hearing. I'll say to them, I'm hearing this from you. This is what I'm hearing, which includes sometimes the words that they've said. Sometimes I'll reflect back as a coach using reflection skills, but sometimes I'll say, well, what I'm hearing from you is that I get sense of from you is this. Is that the case? And very often they'll say that. And then sometimes I feel like a TV media presenter, like where there's somebody in their ear whispering. And I'll sometimes hear a question. I mentioned it one in this book. I remember once, David, with your permission, somebody early on in my coaching days, I'd given this talk on my Become a Yacht talk. This guy came along. He was sat in one of the first rows. He rang me afterwards saying, look, Rasheed, can I come and speak to you? He didn't want to come to me as a client. He just wanted to talk. There's something about the speech that had resonated with him. He came to see me in my coaching studio back when I used to see people one-to-one in person. I don't do much of that these days. But he came along to me. He told me his life story. Took him about an hour to tell me his life story. And his life story was that there'd been all these ups and downs, and from very early on, people had, I think, was estranged from his parents and so on. People thought he would come to nothing, etc. And then in his life, there were just two positive sprouts of positivities. Girlfriend who he'd met recently, who believed in him. Somebody in personal development believed in him. But broadly, it was the story. It wasn't good enough. When he'd finished telling his story and I was just listening, this question fell out of my lips. I did not consciously ask this question. And the question was, and I think it's the best question I've ever asked anybody, the question that I heard land in the room was, how much of your life story, that life story, has got anything to do with you? How much of the story that you've told me has got anything to do with you? We both paused. He said, almost none of it. All of this story that he had been told. So there's something that sometimes if we're still, if we're present, magic happens. The questions that need to come. The creating that space of, as a therapist, where people trust you, because before a word's said, when we first sit down, they've got to feel as though they're comfortable enough. There's something about the energetics. These things are really important. It's important for us to bear in mind as coaches. It's really important for us as creators to be aware of this. So for me, that's all part of it. For me, it's about a journey of trusting. But I will say, it wasn't easy, because in the early days, especially when I first started coaching, I was saying to my best friend, when I was on my own journey, I was like, really? Are people going to want to hear about mindfulness, about meditation? That people aren't ready for, are people ready for that? But what I learned was I needed to trust, to have the courage in what was being clear to me about what did and what didn't chime with me, because there's lots of things about my industry that didn't chime with me. That you have to achieve this, you have to achieve that. For me, I always felt it belied the fact, it almost forgets who I am already. I've got to go out and achieve this. Well, nobody knows already who I fully am. I remember very clearly after about 3 years coaching people, all these different people would come and see me, TV personalities, this, ordinary people, and they would all tell me some story about themselves, usually a variation of I'm not good enough, or I could be better. It's the same story, really. I could be better, or I'm not good enough. It's the same variations of the same story. All I could see after a while, I was become aware that I could just see this magical person sat in front of them. So I don't completely, is somebody's life story the truth? Yes, the chronological events are true. Is it the whole truth? No, because they weren't there for all of that. There are other bits that aren't. Is it nothing but the truth? No, because we tell things in a particular way. So I learned to see the magic that was already there and to reflect that back to people. And that's all I do, really. So it surprises me sometimes when people are interested in anything that I've got to say, because in a way, I'm not a coach at all. In a way, I'm not a singer of the soul. All I do is sing the song, inviting somebody to just embrace themselves and life itself. That's all I do. I don't think that I do anything special, but I know what it is that I'm there to do. And I just trust that and trust that process. But I'm surprised sometimes. I'm very, very surprised. I'm really surprised. All sorts of people come to see me. All sorts of people who are far more qualified than me come and seek my counsel. Goodness knows why. But can I tell you one other quick story on that?
Please,
I
please.
looked up what my name, Rasheed, my first name. So Rasheed is my first name. My middle name is a Nigerian Yoruba name, which means house of many crowns. But my first name, Rasheed, I'd never liked it as a child. Never liked this this name as a child. And it's interesting because maybe I've always been a hybrid of lots of things. My father was Muslim. I didn't know my mother was Christian. I'm a child of the universe. I'm everything. I'm nothing. I'm and everything. I'm whatever it is that I am. Nothing and everything. But I looked up what the name Rasheed meant. I can't remember. It was like a few years into being coached, maybe about 5 or 6 years into coaching, probably about 10 years ago now. And the name Rasheed means to give counsel to show the right path.
Wow.
So this name that I'd been given, only that when later on in thingy, when I was doing this, did I look the name up, and it meant to give counsel to show the right path. So maybe there's something in that. So there's something interesting, I guess, about that, isn't there?
I think there definitely is. It reminds me of something similar happened with me and my Hebrew name. That I had asked, I was around 27, and I remember calling my dad and said, "What does my Hebrew name mean?" And it's 3 different names. And after he told me that, I realized, oh my gosh, my name had the answer that I've been looking for the entire time.
Wow. Well, what does it mean?
Yeah, it's my full Hebrew name is Yeshaya David Meir. And it's a long story with the meaning, but it means Yeshaya is salvation through God or a higher power, and then David is beloved, and Meir is who shines light. So, and there's an interesting string that if you combine all of 3 of them, and so what you're saying is really so it's so raw, it's so real, and what I appreciate it is that you don't hear that from many people. You don't hear people talking in the way that you're speaking. And even for people who are maybe watching this interview, I think what Rasheed, what you just said is something that, you know, maybe 0.1% of coaches will actually like tell, but that's the real deal. That's really what it is. It's about sitting with somebody and really honoring and witnessing everything that they are and everything that they're bringing to the table. It's not about having a certain checklist or a manual or something. It's really, and with that, then there's something that's so much greater beyond that you can help and really bring a person to their fullest growth and fullest potential. And it's making me think of Carl Jung, the great, Freud, one of Freud's students, a great psychologist, who in his book, Memoirs, Dreams, and Reflections said, there is no method. He gave this account of, he had this dream one night, and the next day he had a brand new client he never saw before in the dream. What he realized was about the client. He told the client about the dream, and that helped the client transform in just one session. And he said, there's no method.
It's interesting that when I trained as a coach, I went because I wanted tools to help these singers in performance. And then soon after that, I felt for a long period in terms of my career as though I wanted to shed the tools. I wanted to just be, I just wanted to be. Now over the time, I've kind of developed some of my own tools, but sometimes if somebody's really on this journey of finding themselves, the job is just to listen and to be still and to just to invite them to be themselves and to embrace life itself. The challenge is that sometimes, as you've indicated, that the journey of somebody who really wants to be themselves, it can seem difficult or lonely. It can seem odd. You might feel as though, why am I going on this journey? Am I going to lose me? There can be that fear of the mind that I'm going to lose myself on this journey. So not everyone necessarily finds that that's a journey that they want to undertake or it's relevant for them, you know. But if one is, it can seem very, very daunting. But some people find themselves where they've got no choice but to undertake that journey, or that life has been so tumultuous for them. So for many people, it happens after breakup, separation, challenge, bereavement, all sorts of things, different challenging life events. Many of the times when people might come to a coach or even a counselor, all sorts of different kind of people. But sometimes we don't necessarily want to go on that journey, or sometimes people just, or anybody might just find themselves that their personality is that kind of questioning, and they want to find themselves, and they're wanting to find their own heart. But the thing that I've also found is that, and I don't know how relevant you feel that this is to me being here, but I've learned that there's some magic in, maybe this is a bit where the musician, also the singer, songwriter, it marries with the coach. there's magic, there's beauty in the pain. There's beauty in the pain, the disappointment, all of the disappointments, whatever we've had. There's something transformational about it. I know as a listener that sometimes, I remember as a kid listening to music, that when I'm very sad or low, that music, that'd be sad songs, but that sometimes somehow nourish me. There's something about if I can take whatever the experiences that I've had that are challenging and difficult in one's own life and sit with them, embrace them, and then that's something that's transformational. So for me as a coach, I invite people to embrace and not fight, to befriend fear. You know, there's that saying, I can't remember who said it, fight the fear and do it anyway. I have a different take. No, embrace it. How can I embrace it? How can I befriend it? Every single thing plays its part. What's the learning in the storm? What's the learning in the challenge? Because for me, it's these things that will bring me humility. It's these things, and this is why your name is so relevant about that shining the light. For me, there's beauty, there's learning. I learn through the pain, through my disappointments and those things. This learning, it's what gives us empathy. It's what gives wisdom and helps us to deeply connect and to understand the pain of others. So, you know, and so often my coaching sessions are a little bit like this discussion. They're a little bit like this and that, and then people ask me things, and then, or my talks, and people come to my talks, they're a little bit of this and that, and then they kind of have that, you know, they kind of get somewhere.
But that's life. It is kind of here and there, and then finally it takes form and shape.
Yeah.
And what you're saying about the pain is beautiful, because what you're saying is that you're not turning away, you're not avoiding. The only way out is through.
This is it, because this life, this life, whatever I take on it, this beautiful finite life and this experience of it, this time, as we have this human, this life, we know it has its ups and downs. We know it's finite. So there's an opportunity through the pain and through any disappointment, any breakup, any bereavement, through any loss, any disappointment, through times when two people haven't misunderstood each other, when I lose a job or there's a problem in my business or whatever it might well be. There's that opportunity to really appreciate and be tender to this experience, to oneself, to one's other fellow people who are trying to find their own way, and to embrace it. I have a saying, you know, throw your arms around the world and hold on tight, but not through fear, but because of your love. You know, that's all I can say. So for me, sometimes after a long journey, we find it's a bit like, I remember reading that book. What's that book called? The Alchemist. Reading it, and I thought, oh, this is a rich book, but at the same time, there's a lot in it. But I wonder, I thought there was a lot in it, and yet not. So there's this paradox that after a long journey, you find that you were just where you were, but things are perhaps simpler or more straightforward, as long as we don't get too lost in our minds. So that's really that's all I found on this particular journey. I found and I found that, and I remember this quote. Another quote came to me. Struck me like about 8 years ago. It struck me, you know, David, that there's only one difference between the people who are so-called happy and so-called unhappy, which is the same difference between the people who are so-called wise and the people who are so-called unwise. The happy people, the wise people, embrace themselves, they embrace life itself, and they embrace others. The unhappy people, the unwise, don't. That's the only difference. That's the only difference that I found in this journey, being a coach, professionally as a singer. That's the only difference. That subtle thing, that's it. So if I embrace this experience, if I embrace myself today as I am now, if I embrace others as best I can, and of course there'll be challenges, there'll be times where I'll be finding difficulties with that. If I do that, then my life will be rich, other people's lives will be rich, and so on. That's this journey as far as I see it.
It's so true. And it reminds me of the quote that you said before. And it's funny about the quotes. I feel like we could almost have like a quote jam. Just go back and forth for like an hour. Because there were several. There was like Nietzsche coming to mind. There was a lot of different people. You know, Nietzsche said, I owe all of my wisdom to my suffering. And because of my suffering, I know more than the wisest or shrewdest man could ever know. And which is that really life is, not only if you're, like you said, if you're still and quiet enough, life will whisper its treasures to you. But if we really do pay attention, life is teaching us lessons all the time. It's not just once a year, it's constantly on a day. This morning I woke up, there was this beautiful butterfly. The colors and the patterns, Rasheed, were just, I've never seen it before. And unfortunately it was, I don't know if an animal had it, got to it in the night. And so there was like a very rich lesson actually in that for me this morning, and I buried it. And but if all, it's, life is always speaking to us
all the times, and all those things that we think, you know, and of course nobody wants often those challenging trials and so on, but those things, even that, the argument with the boss, the difficulty here, or that there, or that the falling over there, rich with learning. And I think if we can approach it from that way of learning, and it can be very, very powerful if we just shift just a little bit of less of that and a little bit more of that. Our lives will be just so much richer. I realize that for me, the job to be done is for our consciousness and our compassion to rise. Mm-hmm. But as a species, our consciousness and our compassion is quite low, actually. Actually, it's quite low. It's not changed from what I can gather from all the stuff that I've read throughout millennia. It's not risen at all. It's not risen one iota. The invitation is that if we raise, but at the same time, the people who are very awake from the dawn of time. So if I can raise my level of compassion, and I can raise my level of consciousness, you know, and often the pain and so on is a very, very quick pathway into it if we're ready, if we can just see it as that, the pain, the disappointment,
right. The difficulty to face that pain requiring self-compassion, that stillness, that quietness of opening your heart, which itself is a painful process. You mentioned business before, and I want to bring into this your book Soul Trader. But before we do, while we're talking about the pain, one of the groups of people who I think have the arguably most trials and tribulations are creatives, artists, musicians. And so what we're speaking about, the ups and downs of not only the profession, but that artistic journey. You know, I'm sure that there's probably many creatives right now listening to this, and that will be listening, and for years to come. And if there's, you know, just maybe a few things, one or two or three things that you feel that you learned from your own personal life that, you know, life's whispers and treasures. So if you're kind of the vessel that you would then whisper to anyone who's listening, what would that be?
Thank you. I think there's a few things here. I remember the first thing that comes to my mind, and I think I put it funny enough in the Soul Trader book. I remember that when I was in my early 20s, and this song in the early 90s, and it was called Rough, Take the Rough with the Smooth. It was by a singer called Shara Nelson, who was a singer with a British group called Massive Attack that had a big hit with this track called Unfinished Sympathy. Beautiful song. It blends hip hop with symphonic sounds. But in her own solo work, there's this song called Rough with the Smooth. I think it was a hit, not as huge a hit as this huge #1 record, but there's a line in it where she sings, I no longer yearn for better times, I no longer yearn for better times, I no longer yearn for better times, I no longer yearn for better times. I take the rough with the smooth, and I wouldn't change a thing now. And I remember here at the time, and I was about, 21, or what have you, I thought, and I saw the video, and funny enough, all these dancers in this video, I thought, she's singing this song, and I could see she was glowing, I could see that she meant it. This singer meant it. What is it that she had discovered? I knew that even at this young age, I knew that there was something that she'd found in this journey. So I think that there's something for me about that, and I know what she means now. I think there's something about that. First of all, music and creativity is about how we harness and we deal with and how we transform life's emotion. We express life's emotion, life's ups and downs, life experiences. So that's the stuff that we're working with. I think that our work, our art, our creativity, whether we sing, whether we play, whether we dance, whether we write, whether we make or whatever, is giving us an opportunity to work with stuff and work with stuff, our own emotions and other people's emotions, life's emotions, experiences, things that we've observed. So my thing is that we should, if when I take that stuff, it gives me an opportunity to exercise, or what I'd say is often, or exorcise my pain, because that pain, that breakup that I had, I can sing about it. And in that, when I'm singing or I'm playing it, it's then done. It's been exercised, or it's got out of me, you know, do you know what I mean? It's, you know, so the thing is, as creatives, we've got to realize that we're dealing with this stuff, and that it gives me an opportunity, a safe space for me to be vulnerable, to pour all of that into my work. Sometimes artists don't realize, when it comes to them, their own lives, they don't realize about the gift of that and to apply all of that. So in other words, for me, if I'm down or whatever, or there's something disappointment, pour it. I was saying in the talk, we were just pour it into your work, pour all of that disappointment into your work, and then I've sung that song from that space, and it's done. You know, sometimes I'm sure, you know, you're a musician, you'll play a particular piece, and then at the end, it's done. That emotion's gone for that time being, because you were fully immersed in it. You're immersed and immersed in it. So then it gives us an opportunity for healing in that moment, because then it's done. That I played that role of that person who's down and out. I played that role of this or whatever it was, or I've made that, and it's done. I can put that to one side. I shouldn't be carrying my pain day in and day out. Pour it into your work, into your characters, whatever on earth it is you're doing, but don't live that. But find the learning through this journey that will uniquely. What's the learning in that play of that person that you've been performing at? What's the learning from that character in that song that you were singing that song? We're surrounded by this opportunity to learn, but we often don't see that. We're so close to it. It's like the comics who don't see how wise they are, and they go home and they end up being depressed when they're so wise.
Yeah.
There's an invitation here through art is the first thing I would say.
I hear that, and again, here's another quote, Arthur Schopenhauer, German philosopher, that music represents the deepest and innermost sadness, but remote from its pain. That music can represent the most difficult and painful things that we're going through, but we're not actually feeling the pain. And I think that what you're providing and what you're showing is that you, with your clients and with others, that you provide like this invitation, and music provides an invitation to say, hey, life is not easy, life is tough, it's going to knock you around, but here's this tool, whether it's through acting or through music, and you can play with these things, you can play with these themes, you can metabolize it in a different way, play with it, and you'll grow through it, and you'll become who you are. You'll then be able to, like you say, sing your song.
Sing your song. You know, and my other thing that I would say to people is that, you know, your job, and I say this to anyone, but it's very relevant for artists. Your job is to do your job, by which I mean your life's work, whatever your life symphony, whatever it is that if you write, you write, if you sing, you sing, you dance, you play. Your job is to do your job with all your heart to the best of its ability, to your ability. Life will go its own merry way, at its own merry pace. In other words, things won't always work out the way that I want it to. In my case, I wanted to be a successful singer with #1 hit records. Guess what? It didn't happen. It didn't happen. But my job is still to sing this song. I find to sing the song, to write the books. Whether people publish them, it doesn't matter. My job is to, whatever it is, in whatever way, including singing this song here with you now. My job is to do that. Your job is to do your life's work, to follow you with all of your heart, with all of, to the best of your ability. Life is going to go its own merry way, its own merry pace. But if you do, then you and life will be the richer for it, for you being here. So when I can, for a moment, just put to one side whether they accept me, whether they like me, whether the song was released in the UK, whether the people want that. Of course, there are some financial things that we need to address, but the first and foremost, I have got to do my life's work. Your job is to do your job with all your heart. So let me do that. Let me create. Let me paint. Let me write. Let me sing, and let me dance. Then you will be enriched. I am enriched by the pure. There's a long time nobody was interested in. And then I respoke it as a stream of consciousness. I read it back now. I'm like, my goodness, this is incredible. It's like, who wrote that? It was like, who wrote that? And then sometimes life is kind. I think there's something when we show up. Sometimes magical things happen then over a period of time. That sometimes then people hear or discover that work. But in a way, it doesn't matter because somebody will be enriched, you'll be enriched, somebody who you share it with will be enriched.
Mm-hmm.
There's two questions. There's the material question, and then there's the spiritual question. Spiritual question is, who am I? You can look at that through whatever lens you want and go as far as you want to with that. Okay, then the material question is, what is it that I'm prepared to do that resonates, triumphs most with me to do for a living?
Mm.
If you're creative, to some degree, you're going to have to sing that song. Otherwise, it will trip you up. Now, whether you do it directly or indirectly, in my case, where it's kind of become a hybrid of things, I still record for my own pleasure, but the key work is coaching. But you can see through even probably this, how they've all merged in my case. Where's the line? But I often think that if you take, for example, a great singer, if you listen to a great singer, a Billie Holiday and Aretha Franklin, draw me the line, as Sarah Vaughan, draw me the line between the singer and the song. You can't do it. Where's the line between them? You cannot separate them. So what happens is often these things, they all merge because you're being so authentically yourself, but it requires the trust. It really requires the trust, is all I found. But I think it's not about trying to do somebody else's way, because I found that that's not worked for me. So you've got to have the courage to trust your own heart, listen to your own heart for your own music. Then that will be nourishing. What will happen, whether you'll be a millionaire from it, who knows? Maybe not, probably not, but you'll be rich. Mm. You know, the thing I've discovered is that I've become richer than I could possibly imagined through this journey of compassion. Richer in more ways. I'm not talking about financially, without being sustained by life. Mm. Because if I embrace life, life is embracing us anyway, but sometimes we're kind of pushing back, right? So if I embrace life, if I really embrace it, we often find that life will hold us. So the question is, if I'm compassionate, then I've found that there's been riches beyond that I can imagine by just listening and showing up from that space. That's what I continue to discover, but it requires me just being still, but also me singing my song and me trusting this process, and that's it. I don't know how it happens, just like I don't know where the songs come from. I've no idea, and I don't care. I don't care. I'm not interested. I've no interest in it.
You have me speechless. You said it all. There's nothing kind of to say after that. You know, yeah, I'm speechless.
Well, or maybe we can say to close. Maybe this for me is that one struck me this thing about never mind. You know, people say never mind. You know, never mind about this. Yeah. Maybe it is never mind. Maybe it's never the mind. Maybe the answers are never in the mind. Maybe the answers are in our hearts. Because we are born with the gifts that we have, that we're born how we are, whatever color, creed, background, faith, whatever. Yes. We're born into that setting. We're born into the bodies, the thingies that we are. The personalities, people often say it was there. The aptitudes are there. Yes, then maybe sometimes with some ideas and faiths we're given, or we may or may not have choice, whatever. It is how it is. Life is what it is.
Yeah.
But something here about how if we just trust that and know that, therefore, I have these innate gifts. I have this song, this gift. Let me just share it. Let me just share it. Let me just show up from that space. There's something, therefore, that's already there. If I can trust my heart, follow it, and not get too caught up into the ideas and all of that kind of stuff, and just show up, recognizing that other people see things differently, are wired differently, believe different things. Who cares? Let me just show up with heart, with kindness, with compassion, which is at the core of whatever anybody will think or believe. That's at the core. Let me show up from that space and watch the magic that happens. Watch it. Watch the magic. However long our life is, however long or short this life is, watch the richness of the magic if you show up from that space. And with everybody that you meet, there's this opportunity for magic. It might be very subtle, that just a smile is shared. That's all I've discovered on this journey. But I've learned that I thought, you see, on this journey of the heart, which is what I'd called it, I thought that, okay, it might be nice in some ways, but the thing that surprised me, David, is this: the mind then becomes sharper. The thing that we prize everything else over everything else, the mind, the knowledge, and so on, I found much to my surprise, the mind is sharper. So when I'm coaching people, the mind is sharp. I see people with so many, their minds are so ineffectual because the heart isn't there. Do you see? So it's just the mind's all over the place. They're caught in a minefield. So the thing that we prize so much, the mind will become richer also, sharper, smarter if you trust the heart.
And I have to add to that too, something that you had told me several years ago, which was, yes, it's sing your song, allow your heart to sing, but there's also, you mentioned, hopefully you have a very long life, and we all have very long lives, and there's a time for everything. And you once, I remember, wasn't sure what direction to take at a certain point in my life, and you said, well, if you look at your whole life as a song, what would your song be singing right now? Would it be the verse? Would it be the chorus? Would it be the intro? Would it be kind of like, what would the harmonies be like? And help that to guide you. And I think that's the beautiful thing, which you said, is that when you get into that space where you're being that authentic self and you're showing up, you're showing up with both feet forward, and you are saying, here I am, this is who I am, this is what I am, and I'm gonna sing it. I'm gonna tell you my story. I'm gonna live my story. Then life takes a very interesting unfolding that happens.
Doesn't it just? And the other thing I said to you, which is so true here in this context, so I'm so glad you said that, is that whatever path because sometimes people might be listening to this, watching this, thinking, what path shall I take? If you're authentically yourself, it's of no consequence which path you take, because you will always be showing up, whether you're a gardener, you'll garden with such heart. Whether you're a therapist, whether you're a healer, or you're a singer, or you're thingy, you're the same thing. That's the thing that I've discovered. It's the same. The quality, the richness, everybody's heart will be enriched. Everybody's lives will be enriched in some way. Okay, it's just that whether it's they're enriched through flowers, by a painting, through a song, or whatever. Everybody's life is enriched, or by the quality of whatever. That's the invitation here. That's the magic. That's the magic. Maybe there's one last quote I'd love to share, which is, that compassion is even more powerful than courage, and courage will be required at certain points, but compassion is even more powerful than courage. Sure, with courage you can conquer the world, and many people have tried to do that, but only with compassion can you heal it. Compassion is even more powerful than courage. With courage you can conquer the world, and so many people try and conquer the world personally, as groups, whatever, nations, empires, whatever. But only with compassion can you heal, can you really build it. Isn't that interesting? Only with compassion. So if it's that sustainability, if we're really wanting that happiness, that fulfillment, that peace, it requires that I come to peace with my mind, I embrace peace, I live peacefully, I live from heart. That's it. That from a compassion, and I find that compassion is just, it's like I say, it's the wisdom and compassion are the only two things. The more you draw on them, the deeper they get. The more you draw on them, the more you draw on compassion, the more compassionate you are, the more you share it, the deeper it gets, the more of it, the more plentiful it becomes. How incredible is that?
And my hope, Rasheed, is that for the people who are listening, that they listen to what you just said, because I think that what you said, I mean, among everything that we've talked about today, what you just said is so pivotal, because especially at this moment too in time, just the period of our history of society, of global society, the words that you just spoke, I think, are so needed, and hopefully, I hope that it inspires others, other coaches, other creatives, other musicians, to really think that and bring that to heart, and to sink in, and to share that message and that with the world, because that's really how we're going to move forward as a society, which we need to do.
Thank you. I think it's a wonderful closing words. I'm so glad that I think those are wonderful words. I couldn't agree with you more. Thank you so much.
And to just close up, we never mentioned Soul Trader, which I had the privilege of being at the book release. And we were talking about heart, and some of the spaces that are most difficult to bring your heart into the game is in business and in the business world. Can you speak just a moment about Soul Trader?
Sure. It kind of links it all together. Well, I wanted to write a book. When I wrote Soul Trader, I wanted to write a book, first and foremost, for people who are creatives. I wanted to write a book for people who were doing business from the heart, coaches, healers, therapists, to write a book that and because many business books start off from finance, marketing, these things, valid and so on. But if you're a creative, if you're a healer, if you're a coach or whatever, you're probably going to start from a far more passionate point of view of who you are and what you do. So it was originally called Soul Trader Building Your Business by Heart, by these heart qualities that we talked about. And it takes people for a journey of 7 C's plus 1: clarity, customers, courage, cooperation, conversations, creativity, compassion, and one extra one, which is change. And so the invitation is that we go on this particular journey of essentially from the heart to build our business from the heart. And it just helps people to build that business, whether they're a soul trader, an individual, and the play is on the word soul, that you're one person or that you do business from the heart. So that's what that's what the book Soul Trader is about. And it's about really wanting to also, its big aim is to not only arm people who are, to enable people who wanting to do business from the heart, the soul trader, the therapist, the healer, the coach, the singer, the entertainer, whatever, to be able to build a business their own way, often with little or no money, because I had little or no money. So creatively, so it's about how you can do this through creatively and through relationships, through collaboration. But it's also about, it's an invitation for people who perhaps feel that their traditional business doesn't chime with them. It's an invitation to do business far more from the heart. So let's say if I feel suddenly pick this up and it might help give me in another way. So it's my contribution to that world, if you like, of business. In the same way that Gift of Inner Success is my contribution in terms of life coaching, it's my contribution to kind of to business, and that's what the book is essentially about. It's essentially the same song now. It's all the work is the same. It's the same song. It's the same song. It's a ballad.
Rasheed, I'm struck too by, to kind of bring this full circle. The very first thing that you talked about was being a child and writing as a child. And I had that vision when you told me that here's Rasheed probably alone with his paper and pencil, writing and through self-expression. And now as author, as a speaker, as a coach, and as a musician, a vocal, there's just, what beautiful gifts you've brought to the world. And
Can I just wrap up with one tiny story on that?
Please,
funny
yeah.
that. When I wrote Soul Trader, because I'd forgotten, it was the first book I'd had published, the only book to date I'd published by a publisher, so I was excited about it. And I thought, I wonder if, and I suddenly remembered, I'd forgotten that the first thing I wanted to be was an author. I thought, let me see if I could track down my old English teacher who was a best-selling author. And so I thought, let me see if he's still alive. It's still alive. Still alive, now. And he, and in fact, we just messaged each other recently. I looked him up. I found him, managed to find him on LinkedIn. And I said, I want to thank you so much for what you did. And I remember once at school, he said, look, if you want to be, because I used to think I was clever and all of this. He said, if you want to be an author, then sort your grammar out. I never sorted my grammar out, but that was an acknowledgement from him of what I wanted to do. So it stayed with me. I messaged him and I said, thank you so much. He replied to me saying, I always knew that you would amount to something. And for me, that was the most powerful feedback, review thing that I could get, which was that it? And for me, that moment almost went full circle. That somebody saw something in me. And I guess that's what we coaches do, isn't it? We see something, we help people see something in of themselves, or as musicians that we help people see their own magic or see a way through. So that was quite touching and quite extraordinary how things kind of went full circle with that as an author. Kind of funny.
And on the note of gratitude, we'll kind of wrap this interview up, and just to express my gratitude for not only this interview, but also for the friendship and collaboration for so many years. And I hope that the words and the stories that you shared and the inspiration that you shared reaches many out there who are in need of it, or who maybe aren't realizing they're in need and they get inspired from it as well, and that you share your light and spread it around further. Thank you so much, Rasheed. It was a privilege to digging deep into your journey today.
Thank you. It's a real privilege, an opportunity to share it. Thank you so much.